What is up, guys? Nick here for another Cinema 4D tutorial, and today what I'm going to be covering is actually an old tutorial that I had made on my old YouTube channel. Um, it's actually this welding effect, but I added these little particles so it gives it the effect that that somebody is welding, and it's got the fall off with all the sparks. So if we go ahead and play it, um, we get this hot edge, and we get these fall off particles that they glow, they're hot, and it looks like if I make the sky a bit darker, it's a little hard to see, so I'll just make it a gray. You can see that the little sparks fall off. We got the hot spot for our weld, and then we got our edge for the animation. And you can do this for multiple things, but we're just going to kind of recreate this in R19, and we're going to add the spark effect for the step. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new project, and the first thing I'm gonna want to do is go under MoGraph and add a MoText. So that's pretty much just the easy way of making a text. Instead of going text and then adding an extrude NURB, everything's in here. The height, you can add depth right here. You can do it's the easier way. I know I had forgot to show you this guy in the basics video, so we're covering it now, at least. So, just for tutorial, I'm going to do one letter for this, and I'm just going to do N. Nice and simple. I know I did the O in the other one, I did O in this one here, but we'll do it with N, just to show you that it can be done with different letters. So, you go ahead and choose a font. Let's pick a font here. Don't really like that one so much. Keep on. Alright. We're just going to go with, we'll do Aldo the Apache. So, we got our nice blocky font here. It works a lot nicer with straight edges. When you start getting curves and stuff, it's harder to line your spline up so that you can actually make your light follow it. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some filler caps and add 2 centimeters for both of these to give this nice little edge. Now that we have our letter that we want to choose, what we're going to do is we have to create a spline outlining this N. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come into my front view here, and now we got a nice view of our letter. I'm going to come under this one with the pen, and I'm just going to click pen. And this is going to let me draw out a spline. And since this is nice and straight edges, I'm not going to need to try to do curves. So I'm just going to quickly draw out by just clicking on each point that's kind of like a corner, I guess you can say. You just quickly draw out our spline here, and to close it, you just go over our first dot and you just click, and it closes our spline. So now we have this spline of our N. I'm just going to move it forward a little bit so it's just at the front of our letter. And it's really hard to see, but if I cancel out our MoText right now, we have our N spline right there. Now, what we're going to want to do for our flash or our hotspot, or whatever you want to call it, we're going to need a light. So I'm just going to come grab a normal light object. And when we render this, it actually illuminates the scene with our light, which we don't really want that. So if you scroll down here in our general properties for our light, there is this little option for no illumination. We check that on, and now our light won't illuminate our scene. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is choose a color. I was making my light bright orange, like this, maybe a little bit closer to red, and you still won't be able to see it, but that'll change soon. I'm just going to change the visible light to visible. Actually, that's the wrong one. Don't change that one. Keep that one off. What we're going to be doing is we're going to come to the lens, and we're going to change this one to high 8. So now when we come back and render, we get this lens flare effect that our light gets. I am going to change the scale of our high 8 down to about 20. So it's a nice hotspot. I'm going to go 25 actually. And I'm going to make the brightness maybe like 150 just to get a hotter spot. And I'm going to come into our editor here under that edit button, and I just don't want so much fall off from the light, these like little rays sticking out. So I'm just going to drag this down to about 15, and this just kind of the R is kind of just like the height. So I'm just going to drag it down to about like, let's go with 0.4. That's 0.5. We'll go 0.4. And I'm also going to make this light a nice orange. It doesn't really matter too much because our light is already orange. But now when we render, we have this very concentrated source of light down here. So now that we got our light set up, and we got our spline set up, and we have our text. This text is very white. It's so bright. I'm just gonna make it more like the default, there we go, like the default color that you get. There, a little darker. So we have our hotspot for our flash, and we got our spline and our letters. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So now that we're going to want to do is we want to attach this light to this spline. So there's a pretty easy way to do this. So we click on our light, then we right click, we go Cinema 4D tags, and we go Align to Spline. And then you click and drag your spline into the spline path bar down here, and it aligns our spline perfect. And then there's this option here to change the position, which we can use to animate our light following our letter. So to animate this, I'm just going to make this about 150 long, 150 frames. I'm going to click on our Align to Spline tag, and on frame 0, so our light is at the beginning, I'm going to make a keyframe for position 0. So on this little button beside position, I'm going to control click, and it's going to turn red, and it's going to add the keyframe down here. So I'm going to move our timeline all the way to 150. I'm going to change this to 100%. It's not going to move spots because it finishes in the same spot it starts. And I'm going to add another keyframe by control clicking that little button. So now, when we go back, you'll notice that the light is now following our letter. The one thing I do not like is it jumps around and then it goes very slow on these short edges, and then it jumps very fast and it goes slow on these short edges. That's because the spline has it has points, and there's the same amount of points kind of on this edge as there is this edge, so it has to go faster on this long edge to cover the same amount of points as this edge. Either way, it's not too important. If we just click on the spline object, we go to intermediate points, and we just change it to uniform, that just fixes that right up. There is the number of points. I'm just making it bigger because when it was at I think it was at 5 or whatever, it had these rounded corners. So I'm just going to change it to 30 to give it these other corners. And now when we click play, it goes. Like so. So we'll change that back to 20. Perfect. So now we have a fluid movement for our light. I'm just going to change, I'm going to click on one of these keyframes, and I'm going to change the interpolation to linear, just so it doesn't start slowing down at the end. It just goes the same speed. That is very fast, but it does have lots to cover. So if I had changed this to like 300, I can just drag our keyframe and it'll move slower. So it gives it a nicer effect. So it depends how much your letter has to cover is going to be how long your animation is going to have to be. Alright, so the next step here is we want to add that hot edge that follows our light on the way up. And this is very nice and it's very simple. All you got to do is click on your light object and make sure it's clicked. Come under MoGraph and create a tracer. So now that's going to link our tracer with our light object. So you don't need to touch anything in our tracer object. Now what we're going to need to do is we're going to need a spline, because we're going to be using the sweep NURBS. So we need a other spline to let the sweep NURBS know what to create. So we're going to make a circle, and we're just going to make the radius 1. So it's this tiny little circle down here. So now when I add the sweep NURBS in, I'm going to drag the circle, and I'm going to drag our tracer. And when I click play, you're going to notice it starts to fill out, but in the wrong way. That's because the circle has to be on top of the tracer. So now when we click play, wherever our light goes, we get this bar that follows. So now that we have those, so that works beautifully. So now we have our spline that happens. So I'm going to make a material here by just double clicking down there. I'm going to change the color to that nice bright orange. I can just uncheck reflectance, and I'm going to add a glow. So for the glow, I'm going to change the radius to 1. I'm going to make the inner strength a little bit higher and the outer strength lower. So 10%, because we don't want too much outer glow on our object. So when I render now, we get this really hot orange. Looks like it's been freshly welded. You can make it a little bit more red if you wanted a little bit more red. Yeah, so pretty much I just added inner strength, I went up, outer strength I went to 10, and radius I changed it to 1. And then the use material color is checked for the glow. We can also come into the render settings and add a glow, and then change the size down to 2, intensity to 50 is usually what I like to do, and then it really makes it glow. So, but for now, we'll just keep that off. It makes the rendering faster. Now, what we're going to do is, we notice that our light is no longer visible, and that's because it's actually inside our tracer object, so we can't really see it. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to copy the spline and our light. We're just going to copy it and we're going to paste it. So I'm going to group these two, and I'm going to call this light, and then this light is just the tracer object, so I'm going to call it tracer. So what we're going to do with these two grouped objects, the new light and the new spline, I'm going to come to our right view, and I'm just going to move it forward just a tiny bit so it's in front of our other spline. So now when we render, we should have gotten a visible light. Visibility, lens, 150. I don't know why it's not liking this right now. It was working in this other one. I didn't have any. I just had the one light in this one too. Oh no, that was a different light. I just had this one. It was right there. All right, let's see if we can't fix this real quick. Oh, so we get it when we render it here, but when we're in full view, we don't get it. Let's see if I render preview it. Okay, it's there. It's just being stupid. Alright, that confused me. So technically we don't need this whole new group of objects that we just did. It was just fooling around with us. Oh, now it's gone again. So we do need it. Ignore the past minute. So it's there now. It just decides to come and go as it pleases. Whatever. Alright, so now that we got our hot edge, I'm going to turn on glow. I'll show you guys. We got our hot edge, our little flare for where the light is welding, and we got the animation. So with copying and pasting, these two splines and lights should be this exact same, so you don't need to do any new keyframing for that, and it's all good. Now we're just going to quickly come over here and see what we can do for the sparks. So all I did for the sparks was I went another simulate, I went particle, and I went emitter, and I changed the emitter size to 10 and 10, and then I just flipped this 180 degrees. So it shoots our sparks out. So, nice and easy. We have an emitter, and I just set this birth rate to like 200 and birth render to 200, and then I checked on show objects. And to link this to that same spline, I just added another align to spline, and then I dropped it in there. The only thing was when I was keyframing this, there was a little bit of discrepancy between the two when I tried to keyframe it. So if you just quickly go and you just stop it, you stop the light at each corner, and then you just keyframe the position like so. It only takes like a minute. You can do it real fast. But yeah, I had just set the same keyframes, the 0 and 100 on the same timeline, but it didn't accelerate at the same pace for whatever reason. So I'm just going to do this one. It's nice and easy. I can finish this within a few little seconds here. We'll just go to this last corner, one frame back, set a keyframe, and I'm just doing this by shift clicking on that little button beside position and adding keyframes at each corner. Alright, so then that goes, and that's just 100%. Perfect. So now our emitter goes at the same rate as our light, which is nice. But you'll notice that the emitter shoots the particles absolutely straight out. So under simulate, if you go with particles and you add some gravity, and you just change this to like 700 so that they fall. Or maybe if I do 250, do they fall at the same thing. So we'll just keep this. I think it was 500 in the other video, so we'll do 500. So now when we click render, you don't see any of those particles. I don't see the light either, but it's there. And that's because the emitter isn't actually emitting an object right now. So if I just come in here and add a cylinder is all I did, and I just changed it to like 0.2 in radius and then like 2 in height, and I dragged and dropped that into the emitter. Now it's dropping these tiny little cylinders, and I just used the same material as our other one here, and now we get these little sparks. You can change this to be 1, and then you can add some rotation and variance in all of these if you want, just to make them a little bit more random. See, now they're kind of angled differently, they're falling different, they're a little bit different sizes, and it just gives it some random, so not every single one is identically the same. That never happens. So yeah, so that's pretty much how I animated our letter for this weld, and I added a emitter with our cylinder to get these nice little sparks. Depending how far you are zoomed out on your object, you'll notice that the objects just, our little sparks will continuously fall forever. So you can just add a lifetime of like 20 frames so that when you do, they only fall for 20 frames and then they fade out. So you notice they won't fall forever. Like if I do 10 frames, the first ones, well, like they end right there. They don't go down further. So if you do like 15 frames, it's usually pretty good. So yeah, so we got some little sparks going on now. We got our hot edge, and we got our light with our lens flare, giving us that welding, that burning effect. Alright guys, sorry if this tutorial dragged on a little bit. I just wanted to cover everything in it. And if you liked the video, hit that like button. If you have any questions about it, just leave a comment in the comment section below, and I will get back to you fairly quickly. I'll try to answer all your questions to the best of my capability. And if I don't know the question, I'll do some research for you. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time. See ya.